I'm Jenni Carlson.
I'm Barry Trammell. Welcome to the Jenni and Berry Show. Caitlin Clark changed college basketball, driving up ticket prices and TV viewership, and now she's doing the same thing in the pros. More WNBA games are set to be broadcast this summer, and ticket prices have skyrocketed.
Plus, some media are being forced to take a long look at how they cover women's sports after a columnist in Indianapolis had a cringe-worthy interaction with Clark that I think we can all agree would not have happened if Clark had been a guy. But first, we want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Berry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, Two Fellas Movers, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. All right, Barry, Caitlin Clark, we talked a lot about her during the women's college basketball season, but the impact continues. Are you at all surprised that Caitlin Clark has already had an impact on the WNBA? She just got drafted about 2 weeks ago, but there's some obvious signs that the Caitlin Clark effect is in effect in the WNBA.
I am surprised, and most of that is on me. I got to admit, I was late to the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. I mean, I knew she was a great player. I knew there was a lot of excitement about her. I did not know the extent to which America was fascinated with Caitlin Clark. I guess I really started coming around when I realized the Big Ten women's tournament in Minneapolis was sold out. Not just Iowa's games, but the whole dang tournament was sold out. So this was that's when my eyes were open that, hey, this is different than what we've seen when other great players have come along. Even here, even in Norman, Courtney Paris and some of the marketing and splurges in fan attendance. So Caitlin Clark, am surprised, but I mean, I knew it would be big, but I'm trying to catch up on all this impact, and it's going to be a big time. It's going to be a big time impact on the WNBA.
Yeah, it's impossible to know at this point how she's going to fare in the WNBA, because let's be honest, the women's college game, while it has evolved, it's much better than it's ever been as far as great players, really good teams. I mean, competition is better probably than it's ever been, just because there's more women that are, a high caliber players. So you have better teams. But the WNBA is it's a higher cut above that. I mean, we just don't know how Caitlin Clark is going to fare. Defenses are going to be tougher. Finding shots, getting open, all that's going to be tough. So I don't know that we see the kind of, big numbers that we saw out of Caitlin Clark in college. That remains to be seen. But what doesn't remain to be seen are the number of games that are going to be broadcast. The Indiana Fever games, I think it's 36 of 40 are going to be broadcast. I mean, that's a huge number of games from one team. We've seen ticket prices, as far as secondary markets, skyrocket into the hundreds for games when she's on the road with the Fever. People want to see her. We saw those big numbers, Barry, in the college, in the NCAA tournament, the women's tournament, the viewership numbers. I saw a number for the WNBA draft, which was like 4 million, I think, people watched the WNBA draft, when, frankly, most people knew that Caitlin Clark was going to be the number one overall pick. There wasn't a ton of, surprise or drama, but people tuned in, and, that many people tuning in for the draft. I mean, WNBA games don't usually have that many people. So for that many people to watch the draft because Caitlin Clark was involved, that's an unbelievable jump. So she's already had a huge impact, and it's in ways that, measurable, immeasurable. I mean, there's just so many things that she's already had a fingerprint on, that it is a little bit surprising at this point. But what I said earlier about how much success can she have, how much change can she affect, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how much she can realistically change the WNBA. I think you wrote at some point earlier this spring about her sort of having a potential, sort of Magic Johnson, Larry Bird effect on the WNBA in the same way that they had on college men's basketball, the NBA. I mean, is that a realistic possibility for Caitlin Clark?
Well, I think it is. I don't know that it will happen, but I think it is. A couple things would need to occur. One is she's going to have to be the real deal. When we talk about Magic and Bird coming out of that memorable 1979 NCAA tournament and their impact on the NBA, remember the NBA was a little squishy in 1979, 1980. Marketability, ticket sales, TV viewership. It was not strong. They helped fortify the league and push it in the direction to where Michael Jordan, several years later, could take it even to greater heights. But what did Magic and Bird do? They produced in the NBA. They were even better, bigger stars on the pro level than they had been on the college level. That's what the WNBA needs out of Caitlin Clark. They need her to be dominant. They need her to be a superstar. They need her to be incredibly productive. So Indiana Fever winning big, Caitlin Clark scoring big. That will largely determine how much of a jump this can happen. The Caitlin Clark, if she's just an okay WNBA player, just a good player, going to lose a lot of momentum. If she's a star, the ascent should continue.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about because when you watched her play at Iowa, I mean, she had some other good players around her, but there were no other superstars on that Iowa team.
No.
Now she's going to be in a league where, yes, the players on the other bench are going to be better. Those teams are going to be stacked more than, the LSUs or the South Carolinas or anybody else in the college game is. But guess what? So's her team. Her team's going to have a lot better players than she played with at Iowa. No knock on Iowa. It's just the nature of the WNBA. She's going to play with better players. And does that open things up for her differently? I mean, I remember when Trae Young declared for the draft from OU after a year, as good as he was in college, you thought, this guy gets all the attention. He gets all the defensive attention by opponents. And yet he still did what he did, which was remarkable at OU in that first year, or in that lone year he was in Norman. But you thought, he's going to go to the NBA, and yes, defenders are going to be better, but they're not going to be able to key on him in the same way. And I think the same is true of Caitlin Clark. Now, how does that translate? That remains to be seen. But I do think the idea that, yes, she's going to face better defenders, but she's also going to probably have a little bit more freedom of movement because the team around her is not as pedestrian. I mean, not to say that Iowa was bad, but they weren't what she's going to have as far as teammates go in the WNBA.
Very similar to the Larry Bird story.
Yeah.
Larry Bird at Indiana State. I remember I had debate. Bo Overton was a childhood friend of mine, and we'd talk basketball a lot. We were seniors that year, high school seniors, and he was headed to OU to play point guard. And I remember this is 40-something years ago, but we had a discussion about who was the better passer, Magic or Bird. And one thing Bo said is Bird is passing to guys who are wide open because he's being double teamed every play.
Yeah.
And in a way that makes a better case for Magic as a passer, but it also talks about the greatness of Bird. And the greatness of Caitlin Clark is Big Ten defenses, everybody else's defense too, concentrated so much on her that she's been basically playing basketball in a closet, and now she's going to go into a big gymnasium and play. So I think we're going to see a different Caitlin Clark in the WNBA just because people are going to have to play her more honest.
Yeah.
And what that becomes, who knows? I don't claim to know. But she is going to have the opportunity to do different things.
Looks like freedom, a little more freedom out there on the court potentially. And obviously her scoring is the big thing, but you mentioned the Bird and Magic passing. Caitlin Clark is a fantastic passer as well as a point guard. So it's going to be interesting to see as, she has more freedom. She has more talent around her. What's her assist game? What's her floor game become? Because that will only help her offensively. If she can get the ball to teammates, defenses have to really pay attention to those teammates more. That helps her even more. So I think it is going to be interesting, the chess match that happens, sort of how her game evolves. I don't think there's any doubt that it's going to be, it's going to be interesting all the way around to see how things go for Caitlin Clark in the WNBA. And, she'll change. The game will probably change. The league will probably change to some degree. But here's a question. We don't know if this will change. Can Caitlin Clark change how some people cover women's sports? Because Barry, that Gregg Doyel interaction at Caitlin Clark's introduction press conference there in Indianapolis, that was weird.
Well, it was very strange. It's a kind of thing, you don't even want to be there. I would have hated to be there and be a part of it. I don't even like watching it or any of those things. The question becomes, how much of that is an outlier? How much of that is just sort of a strange personality not reacting well to a certain situation, or how much of that is prevalent in the world of sports journalism, which is still here in 2024. You know better than anybody, Jacko. It's still male dominated.
Yeah.
I mean, I've told you before, my admiration for you, a lot of things I admire about you, but the way you've conducted yourself and persevered and thrived in a 98% male world. Last night we're sitting there in the Thunder interview room. I don't know, there's 30 or 40 journalists in there, and what is it, 2 to 3 women? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes you're the only one. So it's a case of things have not really gotten towards the equitable status yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when that'll change, but I do know that there's a whole lot. You've mentioned there's a whole lot of people who are men who are new to covering women's sports.
Yeah.
And they don't really know how to do it, although there's really no way to do it. Just cover it, and just treat people decently. That's how you do it. But some people don't know how to act in new situations, and I think that's what we've seen. And hopefully this can be a teaching moment that, hey, quit being weird. Just ask her a question and write it down what she says. That's what you do. That's how you do it.
Right. Well, and the fact that, and if you haven't seen it, it's widely available on YouTube or anywhere else if you Google it. But Gregg Doyel, columnist in Indianapolis, gives the heart sign, which Caitlin Clark does in games, but she does it to her family. And he did it to her, and then it was a weird interaction. The truth is he didn't do a very good job of doing his homework, because had he known that, it wasn't something she does to random people. It's what she does to her family. So he didn't exactly approach it the same way I assume he would have with somebody that's drafted number 1 by the Pacers. I mean, when he went into Tyrese Halliburton's press conference a few years ago, when they, drafted him highly, was he doing stuff like that? Or had he looked at the numbers? Had he come up with something serious to ask Tyrese Halliburton about? I suspect that was the case, instead of something that maybe wasn't very well researched or very well thought out. But I do think there are awkward moments, and they're not, we see it here in Oklahoma. We've seen it over the years, whether it was, you mentioned Courtney Paris, when OU had its Final Four women's teams. We've seen it as softball has come much more to the fore, whether Women's College World Series or just regular season games, both at OU and OSU, much bigger media contingent, which for the most part, I think it's a pretty good and, thoughtful, serious media group at both places when it comes to covering softball and at the Women's College World Series. But there are some moments that, make you cringe. I mean, let's be honest. And they may not be as highly publicized as what we saw with Caitlin Clark, but they happen. And I think there is that sort of, you've got to sort of think about what you're asking, how you're asking it. But I think we do that in all circumstances. I mean, I think we all sort of are, as reporters, as question askers, you're always processing, how do I ask this best? How do I, have a question that will elicit a good response? You're not trying to get a certain answer, but you want your athletes, your coaches that you're talking to not just give a yes, no answer. You've got to ask a good question. So what we saw with the Caitlin Clark situation was not a good question. It was not a good interaction, but we're always working to try to get better interactions. But I think in that instance, it just sort of highlighted the fact that you've got some people that are stepping into the women's sports space and covering the games We saw it with the column that ran in the LA Times before the LSU UCLA game, which was just had a lot of stuff in it that was unnecessary. I mean, it basically, the point of it is that LSU is kind of the villain of women's basketball. Yeah, they are. But the way that it was written was so misogynistic that you missed the point of Kim Mulkey, of 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil. You said it decades ago, Barry.
I did.
It can be said, it can be written without somebody saying, man, that was out of place. But I just think there's going to be those struggles because there's not the guardrails. There's not as many maybe people that are thinking in the same way, that are looking at stories, that are coming up with ideas. So it's going to happen, and it's going to create these uncomfortable situations.
Let me ask you a serious question. We've been together 25 years as journalistic partners. Have I ever made you cringe? Have anything I've done in this regard ever made you cringe?
I was going to say,
if so, I guess you can share it, but either way. And if not, promise me you will tell me. I mean, some of us need educated. That's what a lot of it is.
Yeah.
Perhaps you don't know this, Jacko, but women are better people than men, just in general. I mean, we're a bunch of Neanderthals, just sort of from the outset. But here's a good example of what you're talking about. Bill James, probably my favorite writer of all time.
Yep.
He once wrote a little essay about one of David Halberstam's book. I think it was the 1949 baseball season. He did one of his books on the 1949 season. And Bill James found 200 errors, factual errors.
Yikes.
Nothing important, but just number errors in terms of games back and that. And Bill James' point was this. David Halberstam, he's a great journalist, great author. He's written about really important stuff. And Bill James' theory was, we got to this. He had a great story, the 1949 baseball season, full of great stuff. But he figures that in Halberstam's mind, it was just baseball. I don't need to get it all right. Just in general. And I wonder if the same thing goes with some journalists when they cover the women's sports. It's just women. Who cares if I get a little bit wrong? Who cares if I don't prepare the way I should? Who cares if I don't know as much about Caitlin Clark as I do Tyrese Halliburton? And maybe that you mentioned the homework issue. Maybe that's what's going on. And that's a good lesson for us all, that if I go out and cover the Women's College World Series, I need to know as much about that, or at least attempt to, as I do, the Big 8, the Big 12 men's basketball tournament, or the Thunder playoff, or whatever the case. And so I wonder if that's it, is we still just haven't elevated women's sports to the importance level that we have the men over decades and heck, now centuries.
I mean, I think that's probably part of it, but let's be honest. You do this long enough and you're going to have moments when you say things, whether to male athletes or female athletes, that you think, oh God, I shouldn't have said that way.
Yeah.
We've all done it. We've all had questions we've asked that you're just like, why did I say it that way? And I'll bring up one on myself. Last year, before the start of OU softball season, preseason press conference that they had, one of the players they brought in was Jada Coleman. And she, I don't know if people remember, but before last season, not this year, her senior year, but before her junior year, she had really transformed her body. She wasn't wiry her first 2 years, but she was definitely on the thinner side. And when she came in to start her junior year, she had clearly bulked up her shoulders, her neck, her lower body, her torso. Like, she was built differently. And in that preseason press conference, the first time I had been in the room with her, I noticed it from some fall games, I think maybe, or something like that. But this is the first time I had a chance to ask her about it. And I don't remember how I phrased it, but she was, I don't think mortified's the right word, but sort of put off by what are you saying here? And it was truly meant to be a compliment of, right. You have, you look like you're going to be able to smash the ball to Purcell. She just looked different. And the way I said it, it was not right. It was not as I should have. And after the press conference, I said to her, listen, I didn't, and she laughed about it. I laughed about it in the press conference. But then afterwards, I said, listen, I didn't mean anything bad by this. I think, you look like you've done a ton of work. Congratulations. And she was fine with it. So I think sometimes, there are going to be those moments, we all have them, where we just have to ask for forgiveness, ask for a little grace from the people we're covering. But I think, being more prepared instead of less is always going to get you farther. But hey, we all do it, Barry. And no, for you, I can't think of anything that stands out. We've all had our moments, but nothing that makes me
good for me.
Made me want to put you in a headlock or anything like that.
Well, good. And here's another thing, Jacko. In addition, in addition to what you're saying, being more prepared on the journalist side, I think the female athlete, and frankly, can be male athletes in certain sports too, when they are thrust into the spotlight, whether it's them personally or their sport or their team or whoever, there's an adjustment for them to be covered in a certain way. I get it. I get that from coaches a lot over the years. Coaches who, I'd ask, I don't know, it could be a baseball coach or a golf coach or a tennis coach, doesn't matter. Just some sport that's not generally in the spotlight. You ask them a question that you'd ask Brent Venables or Mike Gundy or Mark Daigneault, not even thinking about it. And they're so, wait, I don't know if I should answer that, or why are you asking me that? So there's some uncomfortability. There's some foreign land elements to this that both sides are undergoing a change. They're not used to it. They're not accustomed to it. That's not what happened in Indiana. That was a legitimate just nonsense. But that both sides need to realize that with the spotlight comes different experiences.
Yeah, for sure. And we've experienced some of that here with softball. I mean, I think when you look at how that's evolved and how we are as the coverers, as the writers, as the reporters of that sport, but also how the athletes are. I mean, and the coaches, I mean, they come at it from a different place than they did 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So it's an evolution. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, you're right. The Gregg Doyel, Caitlin Clark thing, that's another animal. So that you don't want to see that repeated, and hopefully it won't. Maybe that was a teachable moment that people will learn from. Hey, before we get out of here, let's talk about two more things as it relates to Caitlin Clark. Obviously, she's now gone from women's college basketball. What happens now with women's college basketball? She's on to impact the WNBA. Can women's college basketball continue with the momentum that she helped build this last spring?
Yes. Now, that momentum is not equate to the same ascent angle.
Right.
I don't know if the college basketball really hadn't had another Larry Bird, hadn't had another Magic Johnson, but they did sort of elevate the sport, and it went on a 20, maybe 25-year trajectory of success and interest. She laid the groundwork for another Caitlin Clark to come in. And maybe it's somebody playing now, maybe the gal out at USC or whoever. But it definitely can. Doesn't mean it's not linear. It'll be up and down. But it showed, when we saw the TV ratings for Caitlin Clark versus March Madness on the men's side, and Caitlin Clark's winning, that showed everybody that, hey, all things are possible. So I think women's basketball is, as long as we don't hold them to the standard of, hey, you gotta have Caitlin Clark's TV ratings. You gotta sell out the Big Ten tournament in Minneapolis, even without Caitlin Clark. Don't hold them to that standard, and I think they can still build to success. So I like the idea that women's basketball can be promoted. Let's just take it on a local basis. I mean, OSU for a little bit, OU for a long time had really tremendous women's basketball support.
Yeah.
For really good teams. That has subsided in the last 10, 12 years. I think J.C. Hoyt at Stillwater, Jenni Baranczyk in Norman, they can build that back. Winning big is the way to do it.
Sure.
But just the model of Caitlin Clark and the idea that, hey, this has been done. And it was done in a place like Iowa City, Iowa. That can be done here. It can be done in Norman. It can be done in Stillwater. So to me, all across the country, it opens some eyes and makes people dream bigger. And I think the overall positives of that are going to be manifested over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, I don't know that they can sustain the level of Caitlin Clark. I mean, I think you'll probably see a little bit of a dip next year, but I think Juju Watkins out at USC is definitely a draw. She's already a name as a freshman, and there are others out there that I think have rising stars. So if the college women's game can promote them, I think that would be important. And then this is not my idea. This is something Sherry Cole mentioned when she was on my show during March Madness, is the idea that with all the transfer portal moving, and we see it in men's college basketball, it's everywhere. I mean, rosters changing year after year. You don't know where anybody is. The women's game, Caitlin Clark, you knew she was playing for Iowa. Angel Reese, you knew she was playing for LSU. Cardoza, you knew she was playing for South Carolina. Juju Watkins, if she stays at USC, that is huge to have those anchored players in the same spot. So whoever the next, great player in the Big Ten is, whoever the next great player in the SEC is, if they can stay put and really anchor to a spot, that might help women's basketball as well. I mean, again, we knew Caitlin Clark wasn't going anywhere. She was an Iowa Hawkeye. There's something, you knew if Iowa was playing, you were going to see Caitlin Clark. So if those women's stars can stay put, that could be a benefit too to the game at large. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's another Caitlin Clark currently playing, but there was a time when, Lynette Woodard was playing and you thought, will there ever be another player as good as her? Then Cheryl Swoops was playing at Texas Tech. Will there ever be another player like her? Maya Moore plays at UConn. While Caitlin Clark might be a special talent, she obviously set the scoring record. There have been other great players, and players like Caitlin Clark grew up watching those great players, wanting to become like those great players. Yes, they might have aspired to be the next Steph Curry as well, but there are also those women's players out there that are making an impact. So Caitlin Clark is going to beget other great players. We just don't know quite yet who those players are and when they're going to come on the scene for college women's basketball.
Yeah, and that marketing is never a bad thing. And
No.
Caitlin Clark was a marketing whiz. I don't know about her, but I mean, the marketing around her was just great guns for the sport, for Iowa, for basketball, for all kinds of things. And the women's sport, women's basketball can get in that jet stream and can get in that wave and ride the crest and do a lot of gains in building up this sport. I believe that. And we'll see it in the TV contracts coming up with television, and we'll see it with ticket sales and all kinds of things. It doesn't hurt that Jenni Berry is an Iowa gal, so I mean she's fully aware of the Caitlin Clark situation. So I think we'll see it locally. I think we'll see it nationally.
Well, and it's when you were talking earlier about OU women's basketball, OSU women's basketball having some great crowds and sort of riding that wave. I was also thinking, even though OU women's basketball attendance has dipped, we've seen great attendance not only for softball, but for women's gymnastics at OU. Sort of the acceptance of women's sports in general. I wonder where the Caitlin Clark effect hits beyond basketball. Like what other sports get impacted by this? And maybe years before we know, but I have to think there's a trickle-down effect there, Barry. We've seen it, sort of the growth of women's sports at the college level here locally. And that softball growth, I think, is also a national story as Women's College World Series viewership numbers continue to rise each year. They keep setting records for viewership. So it's local, but it's also national. But I think it all interrelates in some ways. People, they see that as not some sort of one-off. Like they are they're season ticket holders. They go to all the games. They're passionate. I think there's going to be some trickle down Caitlin Clark effects in other women's sports. I'm not sure I know where it is, but I have to think there's a helping hand there as well. Well, that's all the time we've got right now. And you can find our columns, videos, and podcasts at selloutcrowd.com, as well as on our mobile app. Download that app today. We've got all sorts of stuff there for you. If you want our content sent straight to your inbox, sign up for our newsletters. It's free and easy. Just head to selloutcrowd.com and opt in. If this happens to be your first time hearing or watching us, be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.